Fresh and untitled.
You tell the perspective of, like, you know, one individual for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask if, for you, the secondary characters and the relationships that your main character has with them, are they essential to moving the plot along? Or are they more for developing the main character?
Another really good question. And again, I think I'd give a non-committal answer in that it can be either. I think that again, it's show don't tell, and I think you can tell more. You can reveal more about your main character through their interactions with the people that surround them day to day than you can just by describing what they're doing. Yeah. And so just by default, I think that drives the story along. But also, a lot of the time, the secondary characters and their actions will, in some ways, I think, direct the plot more than the main character's actions. I think again, there's no hard and fast rule for me, really.
Do you have a lot of characters in your book? Do you generally like to have a lot, or stick to, one or two main?
I like to have. Again, it's dependent on the story. I think generally there will be. Thinking of, I've got Straight to You in the corner of my screen here. So picking on Straight to You, that's really got two main characters, a husband and wife who are separated by a few hundred miles at the end of the world. For me, what's important is that the secondary characters, the less important characters, are given as much credence by me as the main characters. So I don't do huge amounts of research, but I want to know all of the characters to the same extent. I'm not really anal about that. I don't need to know where they went to school or what qualifications they got, that kind of thing. But I want to know how they'd react and have an idea in my head, even though I won't tell the reader what they look like. And, that kind of detail I think is important, because I think all of the characters have to be believable and act in a believable way to drive the plot forward. It's certainly in my books anyway. I think it's not difficult to distinguish between the characters, but it just makes it harder for the reader if they've got a large cast to keep track of, I think.
And it's fucking hard to write as well when there's a lot of people in one conversation.
An easy way out, I think, for that sometimes is to give, not make characters cliche, but give them maybe one recognisable trait. Like in one of the Autumn books, there's a new group of survivors, and one of them is a guy who used to be a bus driver who's still wearing his uniform, and they all call him Driver. So you know exactly who you're talking about there. And there's another one who's scarred, who lost her baby on the first morning of the infection, and so she carries around a plastic doll. That kind of thing. So if you give somebody an identifiable trait like that, it is often easier to keep track of them. But the issue can be, as you say, when you've got a lot of different characters competing. And if you're trying to keep the characters as normal as I try and keep them, then there's a danger that they can all blur into one if you're not careful.
On the flip side, then you have the danger of becoming the jock, the cheerleader, the technological guy, going
the brain,
and then you've got the mousy-haired girl with the glasses who does nothing but who wins in the end all the time.
I know. If you read many of my books, I think, that's a lot of it.
So basically, character and plot for you, they evolve together.
Yep.
Is the best way to do it.
Definitely.
But the characters are more important. They drive the plot.
I think so. I think I have an initial idea where the plot's going to go, but it's the characters that will get me there. And the two things are really tied closely together, because until I'm writing the story, I don't know what the characters are going to do, and vice versa. I think they're intrinsically entwined, and you just can't separate them. I certainly can't, anyway.
I agree.
I agree too. Do you think, okay, for you, because you've written series before, or you've got the Autumn and the Hater series at least. The first book in a series, do you think of it, for you as a writer, is it kind of like the one that like kickstarts you, and like by the second one, like you've kind of found your groove? Like the second book is better in the series, and then the third book and fourth and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think inevitably, because you always have to do a lot of groundwork in the first book in a series, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you've put a lot of the building blocks in place by the second book. With the Autumn series, I think it's really the third book where it came into its own, because with the second book, the first I had no idea how successful the first Autumn book would be. So I thought, there might be sequels, but hadn't really thought too much about that. So when I actually decided I was going to write a sequel, I kind of started the story again, and then halfway through the book brought in the characters from the first novel. So it was only really the third book, where everybody was together and all the ground rules were established, that I really found my groove, as you say, and that's where the series from then on in was pretty straightforward to write. So I guess there's always an element of groundwork in the first book, and so typically, you do. I think you do find it easier as you move on in the series. Interesting, the spaces between that I'm working on at the moment, I've kind of been wavering, trying to work out how many books are going to be in the series. I thought originally it was going to be 5, then I got it down to 4, and now I've got it back up to 6 again. And a lot of that is because there's so much establishing work which I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that I was starting it at maybe a point several years into this overarching story, where the characters were living in a world that was heavily influenced by things that had happened in the past, and I thought that I'd just be able to explain in that book, oh well, this is now like that because such and such happened a few years ago. But as I've worked on it, it's become clear that I've got to go back and show those events, because otherwise it just becomes too clunky. So again, I guess that's an extreme example of showing how the plot changes the more you work on a story.
Another thing my English teacher always said to me is, don't read too much about writing.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a question you have, like how to punctuate, how to do this, look it up, figure out how to do it. But don't read too much about writing, because then you're suddenly following rules and guidelines, and you're not letting your own story grow, in a way.
No, I totally agree with that. An example that I'd give is Straight to You, which I first wrote in 1996, far too long ago. And I already said that I hate the first version of that book, because I look at it now and it's embarrassing. And it's embarrassing because, sounding really cliched and pretentious again, I didn't know anything about life when I first wrote it. I was some idiot little kid who just fancied writing a book. I lived with my mum and dad. I had no responsibilities. I had plenty of cash, etc., etc. But like within a few years of having had that book released, I was married with kids, got a mortgage, etc., etc. And so when I came to look at it again in 20 years later, I rewrote it. Yeah, I rewrote it a couple of years ago. It's a much better book now, because the characters are far more believable, because I've been through more, I've experienced more. You know, it really does. Your own life informs your writing, and I'd like to think that it will continue to do that, and that I'll get better at it as I experience more life. And I think my pretentious meter has just gone off the scale.
Yeah, I'm watching. Like, it's amazing. The meter, you're in the red line.
There's a green hum above my computer. A couple of years ago, I went back and I read the first story I ever wrote, and I was like, oh dear. And then I rewrote it or whatever. Yeah. And then I read it again a couple of days ago, and I was like, oh, you know, and then 10 years time I'll probably rewrite it again, you know, so you just gotta leave that shit alone sometimes, you know, because that's you were at the time, and
yeah, we're back to George Lucas again. Just leave it alone. Don't mess with it. It's done. Move on to something else.
Yeah.
So all writing questions can basically be like brought back to George Lucas and Star Wars. Is what we can articulate.
Yeah. All how not to do it questions can be brought back to George Lucas, really.
I wish we could blame him for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah, I know.
I think we'll blame Fox.
We'll blame Fox. We blame Fox for everything because they canceled Firefly. I've always wondered what the best way when it comes to character and plot and story, like what is the most important thing?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing it's just the combination of both, and if you have the skill of combining it.
Yeah, the key word I think is combination, and it is. And I just say I think what I probably said at the beginning, that for me, the plot informs the characters, and the characters inform the plot. And you can map it out and plan it out as much as you like, but until you actually start writing the damn thing, you haven't got your book, you know. And I've said before that I usually jettison a lot of my first draft, a huge amount of my first draft. And I think that's because that's the last stage of planning before I'm actually writing. I only really think of the second stage and the second draft and onwards as actually writing the book, because that's when you've got all the plot points and character points really fixed. Yeah. I do like working in isolation, but there's also a lot to be said for the input of other people, just to give you a prod and a push, and as you say, what if this happened and what if that happened, and they editors do think about things that you often don't. An example, you were just talking about the weather. There was a scene in Dogblood, and my UK editor at the time, a lady called Jo Fletcher, who's really held in great esteem, she just pointed out that in one chapter, at this time of the year, at that time of the day, the moon wouldn't be there. And I thought, wow, you're thinking about things in such a different level of detail to me, and it's just invaluable, you know.
Yeah. So the same editor, like in one scene, someone has a switchblade, and she was like, just like so quick to be like, oh, well, they're illegal to carry them in that particular state, and you know, blah blah blah, and you need a permit. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But like, I mean, writers were so whimsical. It's like, you know, oh, it's perfect to have the moon shining down on this scene, you know, and it's like full moon. And it's like, how can it be full moon tonight and last week? Because it looks good, you know. How much of an outline do you do? Because the way you're saying that you throw away like 90% of your first draft. So have you got a big outline first, or is your first draft basically your outline? Or
no, I do. I start with the germ of an idea, and then I'll kind of expand it out to maybe a page or two, and get in the main story beats as I see them at the time, and then I'll take that down further to almost a chapter by chapter level, and that's when I'll do my first draft. And that's why I say that really the first draft for me is an extension of planning. And I have writer friends who say that they don't do any of that, that they just get a piece of paper and just start writing, or that they have a very basic idea and then just start chapter one and keep going through to the end. But I think that we all, as writers, we all do exactly the same amount of planning and exactly the same amount of writing. We just call it different things at doing at different stages. We all go from an idea to a finished story. And it's just how we get to that, you know. But yeah, for me, I am quite structured. But then, as I say, I end up throwing out a lot of that structure, because the characters and the story, as I get to know it in more detail, it takes its own directions.
I use Microsoft Word, and I'm constantly like, and this book is flowing, and I'm looking down at that word count all the time. I'm thinking, right, so I'm either thinking, right, I'm nearly finished now, and I'm on 60,000, fuck, or I have so much more to tell, and I'm on 60,000, fuck.
One interesting thing that I found on a similar kind of theme is that now, because we've got ebooks and they're so prevalent, we're not really restricted by length. I wrote a story many years ago called Cost of Living. It was a short story, and I wrote it. It turned out about 5,000 words, and I was never really happy with it because I intentionally wrote it as a short story. But I loved the concept, but it didn't quite deliver. So I tried to write it again and ended up doing it as a piece of flash fiction, which was like 750 words. And again, it worked, but not as I'd wanted it to work. But I knew it was never going to be a novel. It wasn't long enough. So I just wrote it, and it ended up at being about 38,000 words. But it was right for the length of the story. And also, I was talking about earlier this a new apocalyptic series that I will be working on that hasn't even got a title yet. That's an open-ended thing. And I'm finding that it's great not to have the restriction of length. You know, the hater books I'm writing, I'm contracted to 90,000 words for each one, and I'm thinking, shit, am I going to get to that level? Is it going to be too long, too short? Because I really want the story to dictate how long it is, not the number of words that a publisher has written into a contract for me. Mm. But I think it's great to have that flexibility and just be able to write as long as you want to write now.
How do you know when you have a good pace? Like, as a writer, it's different because you know what you're trying to say, you know what you've written, you know what's coming up, you know what to expect. Yeah. So taking yourself out of that context, how do you know when your story has a good pace?
For me, it's when I think it's not really freeze frame again over there in Ireland. It's not really whether the pace is right. It's making sure there's no filler. I think if I can.
So basically, if you're reading it and your eyes scan over it.
Yeah. I think I've always had a problem with versions of books that, and doesn't happen so much now, but it used to. My dad used to have lots of Reader's Digest condensed books, and they were abridged. And I thought, how the hell can you abridge a book? Because the writer puts every single word and every single punctuation mark in there for a reason. And that's kind of the philosophy that stuck with me. And I make every word and every line mean something. And if it doesn't, it goes. And I find it really that the pace, if you haven't got any filler, if you haven't got any extra fluff in there, then the pace just naturally happens. It naturally follows. I also like to get to the point where I think a book's finished for me when I haven't got any questions left. As I'm going through, as I'm writing, I keep a list. I usually title it something like points for next draft or whatever, and it'll be a series of questions. If such and such did this, then why did he do that? Or wouldn't it be great if at chapter 1 so and so had gone here, and then go back with each draft and read all of those. And when I get to the point when I finish a draft and I haven't got any more questions for myself, then I know the book's done.
Okay, that's actually really good.
Yeah,
I'm going to start doing that.
It works.
You know your book, you know the idea, you've written down your outline, you've wrote the first draft, you've wrote the second draft, pretty well done, and you edit it. Mm-hmm. What if you're bored editing your book? Does it mean it's shit? Or is it because you're the writer?
I would think that there's probably a good chance that it's shit. So my acid test for that is putting it on the shelf for a month, leaving it, walking away from it completely, and then going back and reading it again. Fortunately, so far, whenever I've done that, it's been okay, and it is just burnout from looking at the same story. It's like listening to music. You know what it's like? You listen to a band and you put an album on and you listen to it again and again and again, and then one day you're listening to it and you think, I don't want to listen to this anymore at the moment. I'll go into something else. But I do anyway. It's not a conscious thing, It's just how I am, and I feel the same about my books. I'll maybe look at something, be thinking about it too long, too hard, and need a break from it. That's one of the advantages as well, I think, of having multiple projects on the go. The fact that you can chop and change, and it often it fires me up to go. I always find at the moment, I find that when I'm doing the office job, I want to be writing. And when I'm doing my writing, I'm thinking about stuff I should be doing at the office. And it's that kind of thing with different projects as well. When I'm looking at one, I'll inevitably have a great idea about another one. And I think that playing them off, playing your projects off against each other is really beneficial. It's really healthy.
Cool.
I agree.
I think the worst part and the stuff that kills most writers, and we all have it, is that fucking crushing self-doubt. Like, even you're on chapter 53 of your 63 chapter novel, and you're thinking of the last 52 chapters, and all of them are shit, and nobody's going to want to read them, and everything's crap, and waste space. So then you have to start going editing them, and you're actually going, oh, they're kind of good. So you keep writing, and then you're on chapter 62, and you're like, all those last 61 chapters are completely shit, and I'm a waste of space, and everything is terrible. It's like constant. It never ends.
You can't. I actually put the whole manuscript of Hater in the bin 3 times. I can remember doing it, the whole thing, thinking nobody's going to read this, forget it. But each time I rescued it, even like last night, I sat here writing some of the new Hater book, and I finished. I'd done what I wanted to do for the day, and I walked away thinking, yes, this isn't going anywhere. This is crap. And then I got up again. I got up this morning. I was sitting in here. I had about 10 minutes at about 7 o'clock. I thought, I'll just bang out a few words, and it was flowing and it was great. And I knew what was coming next. And I thought, this might work. It's impossible, isn't it? It's like you say, it's that crushing self-doubt. It's there all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
When you've written something the night before and you go to bed and you really want to just get into the room, take your clothes off and start whipping yourself because everything was so bad, everything you wrote was horrible, and you need to purge. And, and you get up the next day and you decide you're going to edit what you wrote last night because it's so bad and you can't move on from it. So you go to edit the last 3 chapters or something, and you're like,
it's all right.
Kind of good. And then it's like, yay, I'm brilliant, I'm going to be huge. And, it lasts about 4 seconds until you can't think of a word you need. And it's like, I'm fucking shit. It's just,
we've all been there.
We'll work on that, Emma. We'll get you to not purge.
I think I need a monk. I think I need a monk sitting beside me constantly when I'm writing, just going, Zen. I'll probably end up punching the poor fucker. Shut the fuck up and try to concentrate.
Is there anything you can think of about plot or character that we did not ask that you would say is important?
No, I think we've pretty much covered. Well, we've covered shed loads of stuff, haven't we? I mean, how many bottles have you got through, Emma? We've on 2 hours and 5 minutes. So
7.
My cup of tea is long gone.
7 bottles. Wow, you paced yourself tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for being on the show. We do not want to take up any more of your time. You were nice enough to do this.
Thank you for having me on. And if anything comes up, please share it again in the future. That would be cool. I can think of.
Don't make an offer. We will, because we hit a lot of walls.
No, it's been great. It's been lovely. Thank you very much, both of you.
And thank you. It's been very educational. Like I said, I'm taking notes over here of like, To Be a Writer by David Moody. Okay.
That's cool.
We're going to do the outro now.
Yeah, I'm going to go pee first though, okay?
Okay, I'm going to eat a cookie. Because when I talk to you, my blood sugar drops. We can all definitely learn a lot from what he shared with us. Big time.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that he will be back on the show at some point in the future.
Well, we're going to nag him for sure. Because, I'm smitten, honestly. He was just epic. And, there's things he was saying to me that, I'd be there at times thinking that I'm doing wrong in how I'm writing. And things he said just makes, as long as you know how to write in any kind of way, like grammar, punctuation, spell, and all that, and you've got a good idea and you've got a good head on your shoulders, it doesn't matter how you go about it.
Yep.
The characters matter, the plot matters, everything you do matters. And that's cool. So that means I've been doing it right all along, and I needn't have been doubting myself for so many years.
So basically,
stay tuned, kids. We got some more good shit coming up, and this is proof.
There you go, kids. That's an Irish woman doing a Western accent of some kind. Yeehaw.
Yeah, I'm gonna have saddles on my cats next episode.
If I can do it, anybody can bloody do it.